Let me go into the update, 1160, and I want to start with the editorial which was written by Mr. Brian Gale, Just Because God is Ignored. And it's a very powerful editorial. I'd like to just read a few excerpts from it. He says, wherever you look, very little is working perfectly. In endless meetings, committees, commissions, talks, and task forces, both local and national, convene to grapple with the problems confronting them and the nation. It seems to be an endless grind, and even when discussions and decisions are found, rarely is there enough money to fund the required action. Sound familiar? It should be, as it seems to not only be a UK problem, but extend in so many countries and areas around the world. Why should that be? Simply answered, it is because God is ignored. The Bible is full of admonitions about how to do this, that, and the other, but man always seems to know best and pursues his own line of reasoning and implementation. And of course, he has a lot more to say about this. Very well put. I'd like to jump ahead now and go to the very last article in our current events, which goes hand in hand with what Mr. Gale has pointed out. The article asks the question, why does the universe exist? And then we are quoting from an article by the BBC, dated May 20, saying, the current theory of how the universe came into being cannot explain the existence of the planets, stars, and galaxies we see around us. It goes on to say, when the universe was created, interestingly enough, they talk about creation. Two kinds of particles were created. Matter, from which stars, planets, and everything around us are made, and in equal amounts, antimatter, matter's exact opposite. Theoretically, the two should have cancelled each other out, leaving nothing but a big burst of energy, and yet here we are as matter. And then this article goes on to explain how many scientists, over 1,400 in one group, from 35 different countries, and then there's another group originating in Japan, to try to find out what is the story now with the matter and the antimatter. And I have never read any nonsense like that before in my life. So you want to actually read this article just to see how ridiculously stupid those concepts and ideas are. And we say actually at the end of this article, has one ever heard such total nonsense? Apart from this colossal waste of time and resources, it shows the absolute stupidity with which scientists are approaching the quote-unquote mystery of creation, even though the Bible has been given the answers all along. But of course, scientists are too proud and far too quote-unquote educated to accept the simplicity of the truth. And that is what we got today, and that is why we have all the problems in the world. Because our leaders, whether it's scientists, whether it's political leaders, religious leaders, they reject the Word of God. And let me just say this. I'm working on another Q&A, showing the responsibility of the church to hold the leaders of all these nations accountable for what they are doing. We shouldn't shy away from that responsibility because far too many are. They're too afraid. But God holds them accountable and expects His church to make this very clear. And I don't care who the leaders are, because they are all completely and totally ignorant when it comes to the truth. I also very briefly want to mention the Q&A, which is a two-part Q&A written by Mr. Gale and myself. Titled is Jesus Christ a Spirit Being Today? Now, when you hear the question, you would say, what is this all about? I mean, obviously we know that Christ is a Spirit Being today. Really? Really? We say in our article, at first glance, it might seem a ridiculous question to ask, but there are those who think that when Jesus went back to heaven, he did so as a physical being. And then we are quoting several sources. One source says that his resurrected body on earth was physical, and that the same physical Jesus ascended to heaven. It seems indisputable then to say that there is at least one physical body in the present heaven. And then we are quoting from a Catholic article, and they are talking about one particular scripture, and then they say, it's sufficient to debunk the idea that Jesus did not rise bodily. And that is why we need to be very careful when we hear about the bodily resurrection. Do you believe in the bodily resurrection? Not in the way Orthodox Christianity explains it. What they don't understand is the fact that a spirit being can have form and shape. They completely, totally deny that. And that's why they say Jesus, obviously when he was risen from the dead, he appeared to the disciples in a bodily form, so therefore he has to have a physical body, and with that physical body, he went up to heaven. Another completely utter nonsense. But that is what we are being told by our religious leaders. And this is the first part of 2, and the second part goes into more of the scriptures they always quote to make that ridiculous point, and we will show how ridiculous that really is. I'd like to talk now a little bit about the current events. And we have a Q&A, or rather a standing watch out there regarding the unity of the faith, the way Pope Leo sees it. The summary is, we are told that Pope Leo XIV has become the most important American in the world. Trump is not going to like that. We are also confronted with his declaration that unity among Christians can only be unity in faith. In saying this, we refer to the 1700th anniversary of the Council of Nicaea. What was that council? What did it decide? And what were the consequences for those who did not agree with that decision? Could something similar happen again in the future? That is a short summary of this Standing Watch program. We also have it in German. Papst Leos Forderung der Einheit im Glauben. And so this one is also, of course, covering the same concept, and it is important for us to understand what the Council of Nicaea actually decided, who brought it into existence, and why it has been the predominant factor of what Christianity, quote unquote, teaches. And if you don't believe it, then you are a heretic. In times past, those heretics were brutally murdered. And the question is, could something like that happen again? Well, we know from the Bible what is going to be prophesied. We also have other messages from last Sabbath, both in English and in German, which have been posted. But now I'd like to go into the current events. And I want to start with the situation between Russia and Ukraine. Now, you all heard about the debacle in Istanbul, where they were supposed to meet. Putin was supposed to be there. He didn't show up. Trump was saying, maybe I'm going to be there. He didn't show up. Zelensky was there, but since they didn't show up, he left. And so you had some inferior people who were supposed to talk about things, and of course nothing was accomplished. We say, as an introduction to the whole series of articles which we are publishing here in the update, Trump's happy spin cannot ignore the facts, and this is talking now about the phone call Trump had with Putin, cannot ignore the fact that the phone call did not accomplish anything. He stressed that Russia wants to become trading partners with the United States and made no mention of secondary sanctions, which the Europeans are determined to impose. They're still talking about it. In fact, they have already imposed some of them. America hasn't imposed any. It doesn't look like they're going to. Die Welt, German, highly regarded newspaper, wrote on May 19. And again, you heard about this phone call President Trump had with Russian President Vladimir Putin, and of course everybody expected that a lot of interesting developments will come from that. Die Welt wrote, Russian President Vladimir Putin spoke with US counterpart Donald Trump for 2 hours. There was no sign of Trump's criticism of the Russian behavior in Ukraine. Putin can count the day a victory. For Putin, this means, on the one hand, he can continue fighting until a ceasefire is agreed upon, and with Trump's tacit approval. Now Moscow has nothing to justify itself for. Trump failed to criticize the largest Russian drone attack on Ukraine since the war began. Putin can set conditions for the ceasefire alone. And here's the important part. The pressure on the Europeans is now increasing. The recently signaled transatlantic unity is over faster than it began. Now, we have been telling you for, decades, maybe a century, the relationship between America and Europe will deteriorate. It's no matter as to who is in charge. And we are seeing this now, notwithstanding that, media like the right-wing media is talking about all great victories by Trump, notwithstanding that the left-wing media is, kind of contemptible insofar as Trump is concerned. I don't care. We're talking about the facts. We're talking about what is happening. Bild Online wrote on May 19, Putin once again turned down the most powerful man in the world. And then our comments, as was to be expected, Trump lost again, while Putin was playing him like a fiddle. This was so predictable. And then, of course, there are more articles. Even the New York Post, a conservative paper actually normally in favor of Trump, is saying Trump got it all wrong when it comes to the situation with Ukraine and Russia. Bild Online wrote on May 15, Trump's statement today is devastating. Trump isn't even gently criticizing the Russian president. He even understands his cancellation. The Kremlin must be laughing its head off. Now, these are the reactions which we are seeing over there in Europe in particular. But, it doesn't even stop there. Bild Online wrote today, another setback for any hopes of peace in Ukraine in the near future. Vladimir Putin's regime now refuses to sign any peace agreement with Ukraine as long as President Zelensky remains in office. Now, they have been saying that before. It is not a new thing. Putin has been saying that. Trump should have known that. Trump actually did know that. Why wasn't this addressed in that phone call? I mean, all these discussions mean nothing if that is a condition of Russia, that Zelensky got to be replaced before they can do anything. So that's why this is all completely hogwash as to what we are hearing. But it goes even further. Now, again, we have been telling you, again for years, that ultimately Ukraine and Russia will unite against Europe. Have we not said that? Have we not heard me saying that? Here's an article which was published yesterday saying the readiness of the European Union to maintain a Ukrainian army of 1 million people poses a threat to the security of the EU countries themselves, since Ukraine is an unstable state. That's what Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban said. He said, Ukraine is a politically unstable state, and no one can say what kind of government there will be. Accordingly, there are no guarantees that Ukraine and therefore its armed forces will take a friendly position towards the EU countries. Therefore, Orban stressed that the financing by the European Union of the million-strong Ukrainian army at the suggestion of Kyiv creates a serious threat to European security. Goes right away insofar as biblical prophecy is concerned. Now, when we say that, and we have been saying this, and we sometimes get comments then by some people, and they know it all better, well, the Bible doesn't say that. Well, of course, if God doesn't open your mind, then you will not understand. The Bible is very clear. But I'm telling them, well, you have to read our literature. Oh, we don't need to read your literature. The only thing we need is the Bible. Oh, yeah? Okay, is that true? How come you're also confused then, insofar as the Bible is concerned? But does Paul say, without a minister of God, you can't understand? That's that simple. It is very clearly put. All right, so going on then with the update, I have a lot more to say, as you can probably imagine. Here's one about Jeffrey Epstein. FBI just came out with the idea like, Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide. Did he? Really? Did he? His brother doesn't think so. Mark Epstein is saying that the suicide verdict has to be slammed. He said, suggesting that there was a long list of things that serve as bombshell evidence of Jeffrey Epstein having been murdered in his prison cell. And so Mark is among the many who are cynical of the FBI's declaration. Standing his ground, Mark alleged that there was good reason for people wanting his brother dead, especially for what he knew, what he had on people. Now, who in his right mind can actually question that? I strongly believe that he wasn't committing suicide. I think he was murdered. And there were too many people there. who wanted him dead. Now, of course, here Mark also, you want to read the article, also talks about a lot of things which just don't match. All the reasons being given why he allegedly committed suicide, why he couldn't have been murdered. He said none of that is true, and he gives proof of that. Part now of a conspiracy theory concept. Well, I mean, if you want to call it conspiracy theory, go ahead and do so. But there are lots of things I don't believe. I mean, I'm not convinced that Mr. Obama was born in the United States. For instance, just giving you an example. Too many evidence against that. And there are so many other things. Now, you can call it conspiracy, you can call it what you want. I mean, it's not doctrinal, obviously, but it's my opinion, and I'm going to stick to that. I also don't believe that the 2020 election was the way it turned out to be, allegedly. All right? Oh, another conspiracy. Okay, look at the evidence. Don't look at the left-wing press, sometimes the right-wing press. Look at the evidence. Look what you have in front of your hands, rather than believing the propaganda from either side. We're also talking about the situation in Britain and what has been termed the betrayal of Sir Keir Starmer when it comes to Britain. The Sun wrote the following: whenever Labour negotiates, Britain loses. Keir Starmer is shamefully giving away Chagos Islands and then pay to rent them back. I mean, can you believe this nonsense? That's what they're doing over there. It says, while he now talks tough on immigration for the cameras, we all know behind closed doors, he doesn't believe a word of it. Well, that's probably true for every politician. That's why we in the Church of God cannot have anything to do with politics. Goes on to say, today is Starmer's first step in a walk of shame back to the EU's stranglehold so he can crack Britain's borders even wider open. And of course, Mr. Nigel Farage, who has become extremely popular in England, has this to say: the Brexit betrayal by Sir Keir Starmer's Labour Party is in full swing. Today we learn that Sir Keir Starmer will grant European fishermen access to British waters for 12 years. It's an abject surrender. That was part of the main reasons why there was a Brexit. This was a big issue, and now he's giving it back to the Europeans. And so, of course, they all are extremely unhappy with what is going on. Now, we have this to say about the conclusion of the matter. Starmer has said the deal does not mean that Britain joins the EU. Starmer and the Labour Party are clearly engaging in double talk. Starmer's ambitions and goals are clear, but he will not succeed. Now, mark my words, something which we have been telling you for I don't know how long. Britain will never again become a full-fledged voting member of the EU. However, Starmer's conduct may lead to a further surrender of Britain and its ongoing prophesied downfall. Something we have been telling you is going to happen. It's happening in front of our very eyes. I'm going to talk about America in a moment, but right now I'd like to talk about Israel. We have an article in there saying that Prime Minister Netanyahu said Monday that Israel will take control of the whole of Gaza. Of course, he has been condemned by just about everybody when it comes to the European nations, the other nations. But it is interesting what another article pointed out today, or yesterday, Israel Today, May 23, writing this. Nearly 600 days after the outbreak of the October 7 war, Israel has sunk to an all-time low in its international standing. Some of its closest allies, Britain, France, and Canada, have threatened sanctions if the war in Gaza continues. Now, that's nothing new. We have seen that. We could have added Spain to that, South Africa. They all have joined the chorus of condemnation. But here is the interesting thing. The article goes on to say, most astonishing and alarming is the silence of the United States. Not a single word of condemnation from Washington regarding the threatening statement from other Western powers. If President Donald Trump was accused of throwing Israel under the bus, this is now taking tangible form on the global stage. We know from the Bible that ultimately they all will fight each other. Britain against America, America against Britain, and both together against the state of Israel. It's all coming to fruition. What about Germany? Now, they all thought that now we have a new leader in Europe, the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. Well, so far he didn't do too well, right? I mean, the whole debacle with Istanbul didn't go to his favor, but that doesn't mean that Germany is not going to play a very dominant role in the future. Again, something we've told you. Again, something Mr. Armstrong said way back when they built the Berlin Wall. He said the Berlin Wall will fall. Germany will be reunited. The Iron Curtain will fall. People were saying, are you crazy, and how can you say this? And of course, he was completely and totally wrong, right. We say these things today, not that Germany needs to unite, to have united, that Germany is going to be the major role, the predominant power in Europe. Oh, how can you say that? Well, we can say that because the Bible tells you so. If you have eyes to see and ears to hear. Here's an article which we published in this update. The Germans during the time of Otto von Bismarck were trying to unify all Muslims of the Middle East under the rule of the Turkish Ottoman Empire. Indeed, the surrounding territories such as Palestine, Iraq, Iran, Syria were once allies of Germany during the World Wars, and Turkey was an ally during World War I. The Bible has a lot to say about Turkey and how they are going to be part of a confederation against Israel. It also says Germany may indeed try to conquer Russia again. With the EU's help, by switching from Russian gas to gas from Qatar, they say Qatar, I don't know why they say that, the Muslim world might, for reasons of profit, even support the new German war machine. Our comments. The Bible does indeed prophesy that Germany will enter into a collaboration treaty with Arab nations and Turkey to conquer Israel, and that a war will break out between Europe under German leadership and Russia and other Far Eastern nations, I might want to add, and Ukraine. We are informed that the German leader will be disturbed by unsettling rumors from the Far East and will go out against those regions with great fury to destroy many. The book of Daniel tells us that, and of course then it says that he will find its end when Jesus Christ comes back and throws him together with the false prophet into the lake of fire. All of that is prophesied. All of that is coming to pass. People are as blind as bad, and of course, bats are not really blind, I'm told. They don't want to see, they don't understand. Their minds are completely closed. I want to talk about America now, about Mr. Trump's latest tariffs debacle. On May 23, the Associated Press wrote, President Donald Trump on Friday threatened 25% tariff on Apple unless iPhones are made in America, as well as a 50% tax on all imports from the European Union, starting June 1, because Trump said the talks with the EU were going nowhere. So what was the response? New York Post wrote, in response, the Dow dropped 256 points in a volatile day, while luxury automaker Volvo warned that prices on cars are going to spike. A warning to President Trump. Everyone, including your friends, is starting to get a brutal case of tariff burnout. It's one thing for your enemies to find you unpredictable, another for your friends to worry that you're acting on pure whim. All this uncertainty exacts a cost of its own, angst that builds with every surprise twist. Every day, folks are nervous. Americans are really tired of tariffs. Even fans of the president's theater can get sick of endless drama. Trump clearly sees tariffs as a wonderful hammer, but not everything is a nail. Very wise words. I wish President Trump would heed them. Doesn't look like he does. So Europe has responded, saying now they're going to put 50% tariffs on American goods being brought into Europe. Now, they didn't say all American goods. Trump said all European goods. But we'll see where that's going to go. The relationship between Europe and the United States is deteriorating, as we have been saying, and nothing is going to change that. It's clearly prophesied. America is not going to get greater again, bigger again, more prosperous again, more mighty again. We are not a friend of the other nations. It was interesting, Trump recently was asked, when he said that when he comes to power, the war between Ukraine and Russia would stop within a day. And then he was asked about that, and he said, of course, that was exaggeration. That was exaggeration. Well, where else did he exaggerate? Think about that. There's an article which was published by the Ron Paul Institute yesterday. It says the decline of the American empire has arrived at an imperial paradox. It must either fight a war and die, or not fight a war and yet still die. And then it goes on. You will read it in the next update. They conclude, well, these are your choices. Sic transit gloria mundi. It's Latin meaning, thus passes the glory of the world. And of course here he talks about the glory of the United States. And here comes Germany again. And they say, okay, that's Friedrich Merz talking about, saying, oh, we are going to become the biggest, strongest army in Europe. And he says, we will always defend Europe and all the European countries. Is he just exaggerating? Or is there more to it? Boris Pistorius, who is the defense minister, the former one and the present one, said that absolutely they are working on that. And that for now, it's going to be an army which is built based on volunteers. For now, he stressed that. But he said ultimately, of course, we cannot just have an army consisting of volunteers. So the draft is coming. I'm telling our German members to be prepared for that, especially our younger people, because it's coming. I'm not sure. I think maybe it's coming in the United States as well. Who knows? Let's be prepared. Let's make sure that you have your understanding correct as to why you as a Christian, or maybe as somebody who wants to become a Christian, cannot, must not ever participate in war, cannot, must not ever join the military. It is sinful. It is against the Bible. It is most certainly not anything which God wants you to do.